The last day of death row. Inmate Donald Grant. Why he said no witnesses could live. Hello, friends. Tonight we travel to Oklahoma, where an ordinary hotel became the scene of unimaginable violence. On a summer morning in 2001, two women were at work inside a Quinta Inn when a man walked through the doors pretending to ask for a job. What happened next turned a quiet shift into a nightmare that would scar families and shock even seasoned investigators. His name was Donald A. Grant, a man whose desperation for money and spiraling life choices drove him to end two innocent lives in the most brutal way. For more than 15 years, he sat on death row, his lawyers arguing mental illness, his victims' families waiting through every appeal. But on January 27, 2022, the state of Oklahoma carried out his sentence. Tonight, we step inside his final 24 hours. Stay with me, and subscribe now to Deathwatch Diaries for more prison documentary stories that reveal the truth behind the last walk. On July 18, 2001, the La Quinta Inn in Del City, Oklahoma, looked like any other modest hotel along a busy road. Guests came and went. Employees prepared for another routine morning. For Brenda McElyea, the hotel manager, it was just another day on the job. For Felicia Suzette Smith, a cheerful employee known by her nickname, it was just another shift. Neither woman could have known that within minutes. They would become victims of a man who had already decided that no witnesses would walk away alive. That man was Donald A. Grant. Born in December 1975, he had lived a troubled life from the beginning. Family instability, exposure to violence, and years of untreated mental health struggles marked his childhood. By his 20s, drugs and crime shaped his days. At the time of the killings, he was desperate. His girlfriend, Shalonda Gatewood, was in jail. Grant was determined to bail her out, but he had no money. That desperation, mixed with anger and delusion, became the spark that sent him into the La Quinta Inn that morning. Grant was familiar with the hotel. An ex-girlfriend, Cheryl Tubbs, had worked there before being fired. He knew the layout and where the cameras were, though he underestimated just how much those cameras would later reveal. Walking in under the pretense of asking for a job, he carried not only a pistol, but also a knife. Brenda was the first to encounter him. He pointed the gun at her and forced her into a storage room. Without hesitation, he shot her in the head, killing her instantly. But he didn't stop. Even after she was gone, he slashed her throat and back with a box cutter. It was an act of violence so excessive that investigators later called it one of the worst crime scenes they had ever seen. Leaving the storage room, Grant encountered Suzette Smith in a break area. He ordered her to empty the register and hand over the cash. She obeyed, likely hoping compliance might save her life. But he forced her into the manager's office and shot her 3 times in the face. Still, she clung to life. She tried to crawl away, but Grant beat her with his pistol, slashed her with his knife, and even dropped a computer monitor onto her. She finally succumbed to her injuries on the office floor. Before leaving, Grant rifled through her purse. Taking an ATM card, he dumped the pistol near a store, hailed a cab, and went to see his ex-girlfriend, Cheryl Tubbs. Later that day, he used some of the stolen money, around $200, to post bond for his girlfriend Shalonda. Together, they fled Oklahoma in a stolen car, driving all the way to New York City. For a time, it seemed he might escape, but his face was already captured on surveillance cameras, and witnesses had heard his threats toward hotel staff before. About a month later, authorities tracked him down in the Bronx. His arrest ended the chase, but the pain for the families of Brenda and Suzette had only just begun. In court, the evidence was overwhelming. Video surveillance, DNA, and witness testimony painted a clear picture. His attempt to argue that he never intended to rob fell apart after all. He had taken money and an ATM card. The murders were not just killings, but aggravated by robbery, making him eligible for the death penalty. In 2006, after years of legal wrangling, Grant was sentenced to death. From that point forward, he lived on Oklahoma's death row. Appeals would stretch for 15 years, but none could change the weight of the evidence. His attorneys argued that he suffered from mental illness so severe he should not be executed. Diagnoses included schizophrenia and other disorders, raising the question of whether his judgment was impaired beyond recognition. Yet the courts were unmoved. The brutality of the crime outweighed every plea. For the families, each year of delay was another wound. They had lived through testimony describing Brenda's last moments, Suzette's desperate fight to survive, and the details of their suffering. No words from Grant could undo the horror. For the parole board and the governor, the decision was clear. Clemency was denied. As his final day approached on January 27th, to Donald A. Grant was 46 years old. He had lived half his life behind prison walls. That morning, he was moved into the holding area near the execution chamber at Oklahoma State Penitentiary in McAllister. Guards watched over him constantly, recording his every move. By then, he seemed resigned. The fight had ended not in appeals or commutations, but in the quiet certainty of what was to come. Like others before him, he was given the opportunity to choose a last meal. Though Oklahoma's rules are strict, he selected food that carried small comforts. But the meal itself mattered little compared to the weight of his final hours. Later that day, spiritual advisors were allowed to visit. Conversations turned toward forgiveness, redemption, and the inevitability of death. For Grant, whose life had been marked by rage and chaos, the stillness of that room was in stark contrast to the violence that had brought him there. As evening fell, witnesses gathered, family members of Brenda and Suzette, members of the press, and state officials. The room was silent, the air heavy with anticipation. Grant was led into the chamber and strapped to the gurney. The warden asked if he had any final words. His voice broke as he spoke about pain, about understanding the suffering he caused, and about his own acknowledgement of what was to come. He asked for forgiveness, though he admitted he could never bring the women back. At 10:16 in the morning, the drugs began to flow. Within moments, his breathing slowed. Witnesses described him speaking softly, repeating words of prayer. His chest rose and fell, then stilled. At 10:21 in the morning, the warden declared him dead. The case of Donald A. Grant closes not with a sense of triumph, but with the quiet recognition of how far-reaching one man's actions can be. Two women, Brenda McElyea and Felicia Suzette Smith, went to work on an ordinary morning and never came home. Their families carried that loss for more than 20 years, wading through appeals and arguments that could not change the truth captured on camera. For Grant, his final 24 hours were stripped of chaos. He faced the end not with rage, but with words of sorrow and a plea for forgiveness he could never truly earn. Dear friends, his execution is a reminder that justice can be carried out, but closure is far more elusive. The silence left behind is heavy, and the pain remains. What do you believe? Does the final act of justice bring peace, or only another layer of grief? Subscribe to Deathwatch Diaries for more prison documentary stories.